On the dark rocky planet of Nyla, one of the galaxy's most fearsome species, the Tsar roamed. Towering and powerful, the Tsar had been the stuff of nightmares for centuries. Their thick, stone-like skin and razor-sharp claws could rip through even the toughest materials with ease. No one dared to approach them. Legends spoke of their brutal nature and their ability to reduce entire cities to ruins without hesitation. Yet, something had changed. Something that no one could quite understand. The Tsar were growing more active, more aggressive, and the galaxy had started to take notice. Earth, always looking for answers to the unknown, sent a team of explorers, led by Captain Nova Sky, to investigate the planet and discover the cause behind this unsettling behavior. Nova was no stranger to danger. As a seasoned leader of a diplomatic exploration team, she was known for her calm demeanor and keen intelligence. But even she felt the weight of the mission she had accepted. Nyla was not only home to the Tsar, but also a place where no one had ever dared venture too deep. The harsh terrain and the constant threat of attack made it a planet avoided by even the bravest explorers. But Nova's mission was clear. Find out what was causing the Tsar's unusual behavior and see if there was a way to prevent further conflict. She landed with her crew, hoping to make contact without causing unnecessary conflict, but they were fully prepared for the worst. As Nova and her team made their way through the rocky landscape, every step they took felt like a journey into the unknown. The air was thick with tension, the ground shaking beneath them at times, a constant reminder of the creatures that roamed this world. Then, as they trudged through the barren land, a shadow passed overhead, massive and foreboding. It was the Tsar. One of the monstrous creatures had spotted them, its glowing red eyes locked onto the team. Despite its intimidating presence, it didn't attack. Instead, it merely observed from a distance, its movements slow and deliberate. The tension was palpable as Nova and her crew held their breath, wondering what would happen next. To their astonishment, the Tsar didn't pounce. Instead, it turned its massive head and without a sound began to walk away, almost as though it was guiding them. Nova, unsure of what to do but determined to complete her mission, signaled to her team to follow. The Tsar led them deeper into the heart of the planet, and the air seemed to grow heavier with each step. Something was unfolding, something neither Nova nor her crew had expected. This wasn't a simple case of a dangerous alien species. This was something far more complex and far more intriguing. The creature was guiding them somewhere, but where and why? What was it trying to show them? As they followed the Tsar through the barren wilderness, the questions piled up. But one thing was certain. This was only the beginning of something far greater than they had anticipated. The team moved cautiously through the rocky terrain, eyes constantly scanning the surroundings for any sign of danger. The Tsar, an imposing and terrifying species, had led them deep into the heart of Nyla, where the land seemed untouched by time. With every step, the air grew denser, and the eerie stillness made Nova feel as though they were being watched. The once uncertain ground beneath their feet seemed to tremble with every distant footfall, a reminder that they were not alone. The creature that had appeared overhead earlier had been the first sign of the Tsar's presence, but now it felt as if the planet itself was alive, responding to their every move. Nova kept a sharp eye on her crew as they followed the Tsar, their steps hesitant, the tension among them palpable. Everyone knew they were walking into unknown territory, and no one could predict what would happen next. The Tsar had not been aggressive so far, but the creatures were known to attack without warning, especially if they felt threatened. Yet, for some strange reason, this particular Tsar had not shown the slightest hint of aggression. It was as though it wanted them to follow, to come deeper into the planet's heart. As they ventured further, the path ahead grew less defined, with jagged rocks scattered around and sharp cliffs towering above. The team's movements became slower, more deliberate. Nova's heart pounded, but her determination to uncover the truth kept her focused. There were too many questions that needed answers. What did the Tsar want with them? Why had they been spared? The weight of the mission pressed heavily on her, but she pushed forward. After what seemed like hours, the Tsar finally came to a stop at the edge of a hidden valley. The entire landscape before them seemed to pulse with an almost magical energy. Strange plants, glowing softly in the dim light, waved gently in an unseen breeze, their colors shifting in patterns Nova couldn't quite understand. Small creatures scurried across the ground, darting in and out of sight. This hidden place, untouched by the violence of the Tsar, was in stark contrast to the rest of Nyla. It felt peaceful, almost serene. The Tsar, towering and powerful, stood silently for a moment before slowly lowering its head, as if bowing in acknowledgement. Then, without another word, the creature retreated into the shadows, leaving the humans standing in awe. Nova and her team were left alone, surrounded by the tranquil beauty of the valley. But in the center of the scene, something else caught their attention. A large, flat stone rested in the middle of the valley, and upon it sat an enormous object, one that took the team by surprise. It was an egg. The egg was unlike anything they had ever seen. Its surface shimmered with strange, shifting patterns, and it glowed faintly in the dim light. It was clearly important to the Tsar. Nova stared at it, feeling a strange mix of awe and fear. The Tsar had led them here, to this sacred spot, and it was impossible to ignore the significance of what they had discovered. The creature had trusted them, but why? Why had the Tsar brought them to this hidden place? And why did it seem to be asking for something from them? The answers were elusive, but one thing was certain. The Tsar's mysterious actions had only deepened the mystery of this alien world. The discovery of the egg was a moment that would change everything for Captain Nova Sky and her crew. As they stood in the hidden valley, the air was thick with a sense of reverence. The Tsar had led them here, to this quiet sanctuary, but it was what lay before them that held their attention, the massive egg resting on a flat stone in the center of the valley. It was larger than anything they had imagined, its surface shimmering with intricate patterns that seemed to shift in the low light, as though alive. The crew had seen the terrifying power of the Tsar firsthand, but this was something completely different. The sight of the egg, so delicate and vulnerable, seemed to contradict everything they knew about the Tsar. These creatures were known for their strength, their brutality, their fearlessness in battle. Yet here they were, offering something that held their deepest trust. Nova's mind raced with questions. Why had the Tsar brought them to this egg? Why had they shown such strange behavior, choosing not to attack but instead to lead them here and leave them in peace? The answer wasn't immediately clear, but the egg itself seemed to hold some significance, something that tied the Tsar to this planet in a way nothing else could. The air around the egg felt different, charged with a quiet, almost sacred energy. It was as though the valley itself, and everything in it, was part of something much larger than they had anticipated. Nova motioned for her crew to remain cautious, but their curiosity got the better of them. Dr. Lin, the biologist, stepped closer, kneeling beside the egg to examine its surface. Her voice, barely a whisper, broke the silence. "This egg, it's alive. I can feel it." The others gathered around, peering at the patterns on the egg's surface. They could see it now, how the light flickered and pulsed in a rhythmic way, as though responding to something. Nova's thoughts turned to the Tsar. Could this egg be one of their young? The thought seemed both incredible and terrifying. If the Tsar saw this egg as sacred, if it was a part of their lineage, then what did it mean for humans to be trusted with it? There was something deeply humbling about the situation. The Tsar, creatures capable of leveling entire cities with ease, had brought them to this moment. The trust they had shown by leading them to this hidden valley, by leaving them alone with the egg, spoke volumes. Yet, despite the weight of the moment, Nova could not shake the feeling that they were being tested in some way. The Tsar's behavior was not random. They had brought the humans here for a reason. The question lingered. What did the Tsar want from them? Were they testing humanity's ability to protect this fragile life? Or was there something more to the relationship between these creatures and humans than anyone had understood? As the crew stood there in stunned silence, trying to process what they were witnessing, they had no answers. The only thing they knew for sure was that they were no longer just explorers on a foreign planet. They were part of something much larger, something that could shape the future of humanity's place in the galaxy. The team stood around the egg, the weight of the situation sinking in with every passing second. The Tsar had led them here, and they had not attacked, nor had they shown any sign of aggression. Instead, they had entrusted the humans with something precious, something that could change the fate of both their species and the galaxy itself. The air was thick with tension, but there was also an unspoken understanding between Nova and her crew. They were standing on the edge of a discovery that no one could have predicted. Dr. Lin's voice broke through the quiet, her words trembling with awe. If this is truly a Tsar egg, then this is a momentous occasion. No human has ever seen one before, let alone been trusted with it. Nova nodded, her mind working furiously to make sense of it all. The Tsar were feared across the galaxy, their reputation as brutal and merciless warriors unmatched. Yet, here they were, standing, in the presence of something far more vulnerable, a fragile, pulsing egg that held the potential to reshape everything. The Tsar had always been seen as a species driven by power and aggression, but now, something different was unfolding. They had brought the humans here for a reason. The question that burned in Nova's mind was why. Why had they chosen to trust them with this? The realization was slow to come, but when it did, it hit Nova like a wave. The Tsar were not simply testing them. They were offering something. They were asking humanity to prove its worth. The Tsar had created life, and in doing so, they had chosen to offer that life into the hands of those they considered worthy. But was humanity truly worthy? The answer wasn't clear. Nova's gaze shifted to the horizon, where the dim light of the setting sun bathed the valley in a soft glow. It felt like the whole planet was holding its breath, waiting for the next move. The Tsar had entrusted them with the egg, and now it was up to them to ensure its survival. The responsibility was immense. If the Tsar were to return and find the egg harmed, there would be no forgiveness. The Tsar's reputation for wrath was well known, and they would not hesitate to retaliate if they believed their young had been endangered. The implications of failure were too grave to consider. As the crew huddled together, discussing their next steps, Nova felt a deep sense of responsibility settle over her. They had to protect the egg, no matter the cost. But more than that, they had to prove to the Tsar that humanity was capable of nurturing life, of showing the same care and trust that the Tsar had shown them. The challenge before them was unlike anything they had faced before. They weren't just fighting for their survival. They were fighting for something greater. The fate of the Tsar's young and the future of the relationship between their species and humanity hung in the balance. With no clear answers and no idea what the Tsar would expect of them, Nova made a decision. They would stay and protect the egg. They would show the Tsar that humans were worthy of the trust they had been given. There was no turning back now. The decision to stay and protect the egg felt both simple and overwhelming to Captain Nova Sky and her crew. They had come to Nyla to uncover the truth behind the Tsar's unusual behavior, but now they were thrust into a responsibility far greater than anything they had imagined. The fragile egg sat at the center of the valley, glowing faintly, its patterns shifting in response to the environment around it. The crew gathered around it, their faces tense, as they realized the full weight of their mission. The Tsar had trusted them, But with that trust came an unspoken challenge: prove humanity's worth. The silence in the valley was oppressive, as though the land itself was waiting for something to happen. The Tsar had left them here, but that didn't mean they were safe. The Tsar were not known for mercy, and if anything went wrong with the egg, if it was harmed in any way, the consequences would be catastrophic. Nova stood at the edge of the group, her eyes scanning the surroundings, constantly alert. There was no sign of the Tsar, but she knew they were out there, watching. It was in the Tsar's nature to observe, to test. They weren't going to make this easy. The crew began setting up camp, carefully making sure to keep the area around. The egg clear and undisturbed. Dr. Lin, the biologist, was already working to analyze the egg's biology, trying to understand its unique properties. The rest of the team, including engineers and medical staff, took turns keeping watch and preparing for any potential danger. As the hours passed, Nova couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The atmosphere felt off, heavy in a way that she couldn't explain. It was as if the planet itself was alive, shifting, watching, waiting. Despite their careful preparations, something nagged at the back of her mind. Was this truly the Tsar's test, or was there something more to their actions? The answer came suddenly, in a way they hadn't anticipated. In the dead of night, the ground trembled beneath their feet, the sound of heavy footsteps growing closer, with each passing second. The crew froze, their hearts racing, as the shape of a Tsar appeared in the distance, its massive form silhouetted against the moonlit sky. This time, however, it wasn't alone. The creature was accompanied by others. More, Tsar, their red eyes glowing with intensity. The creatures stood at the edge of the valley, watching the humans with an unsettling calm. Nova's pulse quickened as she stepped forward, her voice steady but firm. "We've protected the egg as you asked," she called out. "We're keeping it safe." The Tsar didn't move, didn't speak. Instead, one of the creatures stepped forward, its eyes locked on Nova as though assessing her every move. There was a moment of silence, a heavy pause that stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Then, without warning, the Tsar slowly lowered its head, almost in acknowledgement. The others followed suit, lowering their gaze to the ground. Nova's breath caught in her throat as she realized what was happening. The Tsar were accepting them. The test had been more than just about protecting the egg. It had been about showing respect, understanding, and trust. The Tsar had come to witness whether humanity could rise to the challenge, and they had. The realization hit Nova hard, but she also knew one thing for certain. This moment was only the beginning. A new chapter in humanity's relationship with the Tsar was unfolding before her eyes, and the future held endless possibilities. They had earned the Tsar's trust, but now they had to prove they could live up to it. The next few days unfolded in a strange kind of peace, one that Nova Sky and her crew hadn't expected to find on a planet as dangerous and unpredictable as Nyla. The Tsar had come and gone, observing them from a distance, never showing aggression, but always present, their dark forms looming at the edge of the valley, watching, waiting. With the egg protected and the Tsar's trust now hanging in the balance, Nova couldn't shake the feeling that they were part of something far larger than they had originally understood. The crew continued their careful watch, taking turns, to ensure nothing disturbed the egg. Dr. Lin's research progressed, revealing that the egg's biology was unlike anything seen before. It was clear that the Tsar had mastered the art of survival in ways humans could only dream of. But what did this egg symbolize? What would it mean for humanity if the Tsar's young hatched and grew to maturity under their protection? Each day brought more questions than answers, and Nova knew that time was running out. The Tsar had shown their trust, but they were not patient beings. At some point, they would want results. The sky overhead began to change, the once calm and serene landscape growing darker with clouds rolling in from the horizon. The air shifted, thickening with the kind of tension that preceded a storm. Nova's instincts told her something was coming, something big, and she couldn't ignore the unsettling feeling gnawing at her gut. Then, as if on cue, the ground began to tremble again. This time, it wasn't just the Tsar's presence that caused it. The very earth beneath them was reacting to something else, something far larger than the Tsar or the crew. The air crackled with a strange energy, and the once peaceful valley now felt suffocating, as though every living thing was holding its breath. Nova's heart raced as the crew scrambled to secure their positions. Something was happening, and they were at the center of it. The tremors grew stronger, and the egg began to pulse more violently, its glow shifting from a soft shimmer to a harsh, almost blinding light. Dr. Lin rushed to the egg, her hands trembling as she tried to make sense of the changes. "It's happening," she whispered, barely audible over the rumbling noise. "It's about to hatch." A surge of excitement, fear, and awe filled the group as they gathered around the egg. The Tsar had trusted them with this moment, and now they had to face the consequences of that trust. What would emerge from the egg? Was it a creature like the Tsar, capable of immense power and violence? Or was it something different, something more complex, something that could change the course of their relationship with the Tsar forever? As the glow from the egg reached its peak, the rumbling stopped. For a brief, heart-stopping moment, everything was still. Then, with a sharp crack, the surface of the egg began to split, revealing a small, glowing creature inside. Its eyes opened slowly, reflecting the light of the valley as it gazed up at the humans. The Tsar had entrusted them with more than just the egg. They had entrusted them with the future of their species. The moment was both exhilarating and terrifying. The future of humanity's relationship with the Tsar rested on what would happen next. The creature, fragile and small, was a living testament to the trust placed in them, and Nova knew one thing for certain: they couldn't afford to fail. Now. This was just the beginning of something much greater than they had ever imagined. The days following the egg's hatching passed in a blur of uncertainty and anticipation. Nova and her crew watched with awe and fear as the tiny creature began to grow, its form shifting and evolving in ways no one had anticipated. The creature was unlike anything the humans had ever encountered. It was an alien life form, yet there was a deep connection to the Tsar, a bond that felt almost spiritual. The Tsar had not simply entrusted humanity with their young, they had entrusted them with the future of an entire species. As the creature grew, it displayed remarkable intelligence. It watched the crew with curiosity, its eyes following their every movement. It mimicked their actions, learning quickly and forming bonds with the humans. Dr. Lin, who had been studying the creature meticulously, marveled at its ability to adapt to human interactions so quickly. It wasn't just a creature, it was something more. It was the key to understanding the Tsar, their culture, and their way of life. But as the days went on, Nova felt the weight of the responsibility growing heavier. The Tsar had given them more than just a task. They had given them a challenge. Protecting the creature was no longer enough. They had to ensure its survival and guide it through its early stages of life, a life that would ultimately determine the future of humanity's relationship with the Tsar. The Tsar had watched them carefully, and Nova knew that they would not tolerate failure. The bond between the Tsar and their young was sacred, and if they failed in their duty, the consequences would be severe. The crew continued to care for the creature, each member taking on a role in its upbringing. As the creature grew, it began to display traits that were unmistakably Tsar: strength, resilience, and a keen sense of survival. Yet it was also learning from the humans, developing a unique blend of human and Tsar qualities. Nova couldn't help but wonder what the Tsar would think of this new hybrid. Would they accept it? Would they see the potential in it, or would they view it as an abomination? The tension in the valley reached its peak when the Tsar returned. The sight of the Tsar approaching, their massive forms silhouetted against the setting sun, sent a wave of fear and anticipation through the crew. They had proven their worth by protecting the egg, but now they would be tested again. The Tsar's eyes glowed with intensity as they stepped forward, their gaze fixed on the creature. Nova held her breath, her heart pounding in her chest. For a long moment, the Tsar simply watched the creature, as if weighing its worth. Then, one by one, the Tsar lowered their heads in acknowledgement. Nova felt a sense of relief wash over her as she realized what this meant. The Tsar had accepted the creature, accepted their care, and recognized the bond they had forged. The moment marked a turning point in the relationship between humanity and the Tsar. The trust had been earned, and with it came a new understanding between the two species. The Tsar no longer saw humans as weak or insignificant. They saw them as worthy partners, capable of nurturing life and embracing responsibility. Nova stood quietly, her heart swelling with pride. They had done it. The Tsar had entrusted them with their young, and humanity had proven it was capable of more than anyone had ever expected. The galaxy had just witnessed the birth of something new, something that would forever change the course of history. As the Tsar slowly backed away, leaving the valley to the humans and their new responsibility, Nova looked down at the creature. It was small, fragile, but it held the future of an entire species in its hands. Nova smiled. The future was uncertain, but it was bright. And humanity, once an outsider in the galaxy, had just found its place among the stars.